everyone! I am the one, the only, the truest Lord Pancake, except no substitutes, for they will probably cut off your hand and not staple it back on later. Now, since in my neck of the woods winter is no longer a season and has taken to just occasionally sneaking up behind you and sticking a pickle up your bum, the days are going to be getting longer and the nights are getting shorter, so I think it's time we get in some horror titles while we have the chance. In that venue, we are going to be playing and looking at the big one, Resident Evil 7. Capcom's latest release and the love-hate relationship they have with all video game players in their Resident Evil series. So, to start out, first thing you're going to notice is, unlike previous titles, this one is in first-person perspective, which a lot of people were a little bit wondering about this because they weren't sure of the change itself. But, much like the change in RE4 from the fixed camera angle to the over-the-shoulder one, at least for this game, it has been a positive change. Everything looks really nice, it plays really well, and it also works really well with keeping things balanced between the VR versions of the game and compatibility of the game, as well as the non-VR version. Now, I do not have the setup to run a VR video, but from what I understand from some other reviewers and other players is it really can be a lot scarier in VR. It does add a lot to it, but don't fret, because you get a special bonus if you don't have VR. And that special bonus is feet. That's right, those fancy smancy VR players might get floating arms and some really nifty effects from people stabbing you in the face and so forth. But the rest of us, we get to look at Ethan's shoes. And that is fancy. Now that right there is something you're going to see a lot. What you just witnessed there, somebody just kind of wandering by, not knowing, because one thing this game has that no other Resident Evil has had is it has an extreme feeling of tension and anticipation. It's extremely different than previous Resident Evil titles, which I found most of them to be pretty fun. I enjoyed them, but I didn't find any of them to be all that scary. And the area I'm showing you now is early on in the game. I'm trying my best to avoid any spoilers in this review, though there might be a few for like the very, very beginning of the game itself, because it's hard to actually show you much of the game and show you anything that might be that might demonstrate the qualities of the game without getting at least like one or two little spoilers in there. Nothing major. You're not gonna like have the entire plot suddenly open up for you. Just gonna be little things here and there. Ooh, it's Mia's driver's license. So the basic story of the game is your name is Ethan. You receive an email from your wife Ia with a video message with her whereabouts, asking you to come find her. Now, your wife has been missing for 3 years. So, not surprisingly, Ethan hops in the first kind of old car and runs out to find her. Now, the opening cinematic of the game is a little bit, to me, reminiscent of Stanley Kubrick's liberal treatment of The Shining, when that kind of opening up where you see the car and they're slowly driving down the open mountain pass, and it tells you and it gives you really all the exposition you need. Wife missing, wife may be found, hooray. So you go there and then you step into this mansion, this decrepit old plantation house where from the get-go you notice something is off. And as you're walking around, I mean, there are definitely jump scares in the game that does make up for like a lot of it, like in some of the other Resident Evil titles. But there's also a lot going on. There's also like a lot of mystery and things that make you wonder exactly what's going on. You'll hear noises all the time, and some of these noises mean nothing. Some of these noises might mean that the member of the Baker family is after you, because that's one of the big differences between this and other Resident Evil titles. There are a lot fewer enemies that you encounter in this game, because the big show is when you're getting stalked by a member of the Baker family, where they're walking around looking for you. You might have to run and hide from them. You might have to fight them. But at any point when you're walking around, you might trigger them to start coming after you. They might come bursting through a wall to get you or something like that. You never quite know. You never quite feel like you're walking around in complete safety. And there are long pauses in the game where you don't have anything much happen at all, where you're walking around and you're perfectly safe, but you're always hearing something that might indicate you're in danger. You're always have that feeling of a threat just around the next corner or just in the next room. And the nice thing about this is it feels a little bit like games like Outlast, where you feel underpowered and a lot of times you're going to be running from the enemies and hiding and so forth. But unlike games like Outlast or Amnesia, another very good title in that type of series, you're not helpless. You do have weapons. You do have an ability to fight back. It's just a lot of times you're going to have to choose between fighting back and possibly risking some ammo, which can be in short supply. You can run out of ammo and so forth, or risk the loss of health that it might take you to, skirt around those enemies and take them down. And it does end up becoming a choice, even with the limited inventory space. Like, you start off with this many, 8 little spaces here, and you can get things in the game that will increase, and you will find them throughout the game. There's no like little mysterious person selling you items in the game or anything like that. You do find these old coins, and there is a place you can trade them in, but it's like a static little place. It's a little side mechanic in the game that doesn't get in the way and break the immersion and things like that. And that is one thing this game does pretty well. Now, there are points where the immersion gets broken, and in this next little segment we're about to enter into here, you're going to see them. You also find like all these weird photographs around that may have a point of evidence. They might just be there to kind of help establish more of the backstory. And there is that little classic Resident Evil puzzle solving mechanics and things like that where, you got to find like 3 dogs' heads as one of the puzzles and things like that. So like, it kind of pulls away a little bit from the immersion that this is just a regular everyday old plantation house and something happened. But at the same time, it does kind of keep things interesting. It keeps it from all being the same. And throughout the game, you'll find things like videotapes, which videotapes aren't just cutscenes that you watch. They're actually interactive. And they tell a little bit about some of the things that you don't see going on while you're playing, or some of the backstory of what's happened leading up to this. Like this one I'm about to show you, which I wouldn't quite count this one as a spoiler, because if you download the demo, the beginning hours, this is that same content from that in this videotape. So let's go ahead and we're going to do this little section because it shows you a bit of the horror aspect without giving spoilers, but it also does do a good job of showing one of the issues with immersion that the game does run into that could have been done better.
Where did you find this guy? Give me a break, Pete. Hey, I only work with professionals. Speaking of which,
and one thing you are going to notice is the game does get very dark.
I don't do ADR.
Other thing you're going to notice is most of the
Okay.
voice acting in the game
Not
is
feeling it.
pretty good.
Just don't be
I mean,
surprised if we have to make a change.
Ethan seems a little underwhelming at times how he reacts to certain situations,
Then we shoot the intro.
but
Like we
for the
always
most part,
do. Just try to say the show's
like
name this time, okay?
Mia
No
and the
problem.
Bakers and so forth, they're all actually voice acted really well.
Fucking shit. Happy?
Really believable.
Ecstatic.
I mean, there's a lot stronger story in this, a much better story than anything you've seen in previous Resident Evil titles. And it's something that I thoroughly enjoyed.
Are we rolling? All right, let's go.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick look, and I'm going to be silent while we play this part here.
It's locked.
Well, until we get up to that point I wanted to talk about.
After you. So, why are we in hell this time? Do you ever prep? What's the prep? Shitty house, spooky sound? Ooh, is it haunted? Fuck me. I was an anchor, you know?
Weekend sub, Pete. Not anchored.
What's that?
Nothing.
What's the story, Andre?
Abandoned farmhouse, missing family, foul play suspected. The usual.
How long did you say this place has been abandoned?
3 years.
Clancy, get a shot of this. Let's make a great cutaway.
Now, this is one of the things that we're going to talk about with the breaking of immersion in some aspects of the game. Like, I'm supposed to be the cameraman, and they want you to stick on him.
Their son, Lucas. Bad seed, apparently.
But this is what happens if you try and follow this guy instead. You run into an invisible barrier, and that is a huge immersion breaker. I mean, they could have had this guy grab you and yell at you for not filming him, since he's supposed to be the star,
Make a great backdrop.
but instead they just have an invisible wall that you can't walk through. And that's, to me, that's such a
Andre,
rare immersion break in the game, because most of the rest of it is done pretty well. And there are some aspects of the game, some areas, like
fucking believable.
they do have regular
This is the last time I
monsters
looked at
called
that guy.
mold
I mean,
monsters.
producers, they come and go,
They
but
spawn and they
the
chase
cameraman,
after you
Clancy, you stick with me.
and things like that, but there's some points where they will break following you. Usually you can use like doors to trap them and stuff like that, but there's one area in the game where after you run after a certain point, they just stop chasing you. You don't have to close a door or anything like that. They just go poof or sploosh, or well, not sploosh. That would be a little more disturbing than anything else. But splat, they just go away.
Andre,
And that also I felt to be immersion breaking.
where the fuck is he?
I mean, I can understand, they didn't want you to get like overly surrounded by enemies, so that you have the option to run. And there are some areas where the enemies will pile up on you, making it impossible to squeeze past them, and you have to fight a little bit to get through. But honestly, for the most part, they handle the enemies really well, except for like those few pieces where the immersion breaks. And the other thing that you'll notice, and
You gotta fucking kidding me.
I have to agree with this opinion, is that some of the game's bosses are a little bit easier to deal with.
Fuck this show.
And later on in the game, the story does change a bit to be a little bit more like classic Resident Evil-y with the lore and so forth, without going into any spoilers or anything like that. And I can see what they're doing. They're trying to like kind of make it feel like part of the Resident Evil universe, but it also kind of changes up the story dramatically. Like parts of the end of the story almost don't quite mesh with like your impressions of the Bakers throughout the game. They kind of conflict a little bit, but it's nothing that's immersion breaking. It's nothing that's going to make you go, oh my god, this is stupid. It's honestly, definitely a game worth
Needed a
playing.
hero shot of me coming down the ladder. So,
It is a game worth buying. It is the scariest Resident Evil game that's ever come out. It's one of the scariest survival horror games that's come out recently. and it's really, really well worth your time and your money. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I am having a great time playing it through. And it does look like there's support. There's even in spring going to be a free DLC coming out that carries on the story after the game, which is wonderful. There is a bit of paid DLC that's already come out, and there's a season pass, but for the most part, you can spend like $69 on Steam to get this, and it'll work out well, or you can spend like 89 to get that plus the season pass, where it'll give you all the DLC for like the rest of the year that they would have to have coming out and things like that. But it just really, really works. I mean, you feel immersed. Mansion feels big and expansive. There's tension, there's fright, there's everything you would want from a good survival horror game. So yes, I would say this is worth your time, this is worth your play, and I want you to go out there and enjoy. So those are my impressions of Resident Evil 7. If you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe. Feel free to comment below, and always share it with your friends. Bring them along for the ride. I would love to have them following me. Alright, well, thank you very much, and you have yourself a great day.